Hey everyone, my name's Andy. I'm from the Finding Value Finance channel. Today we've got Andrew with us. He's back. Again, we used to work with each other. We used to go to the gym. We went to the same gym just by happenstance. We actually met in the gym before we
Hmm.
worked at the same place, which is kind of weird. But we want to get him back on. He wanted to clarify some things about Bitcoin. And one of those things is maybe you can start with it, Andrew, with
Sure.
the difficulty adjustment.
Yeah. No, for one, I appreciate the comments in the last video. And I think, like I told you towards the end of the last video, I'm still in my learning phase of things. And so people that had some comments or counter arguments, I liked reading it. It gave me different perspectives and maybe repositioned arguments and things like that. So what a lot of people wanted to say was, hey, research the difficulty adjustment or the difficulty curve or how Bitcoin mining changes its difficulty. And I am aware of that. I don't think I talked to it as accurately and I wasn't detailed enough. And I did have to reread it a little bit to remind myself all the details of how it works. So I appreciate that. But what we wanted to talk about how and when we were talking earlier was, okay, will this solve anything? Is our thesis of an energy crisis and miners going to be solved by difficulty adjustment? So I was going back and forth with someone in the comments, and they gave a good perspective. And so I'm going to go ahead and explain that with how does the difficulty adjustment work, and how does that actually mitigate, I would say, an energy crisis scenario. It doesn't solve it, and that's going to mitigate it. So Andy, this is kind of how it works, right? Um, when you are rewarded as a miner, it's because you're sol let's just it's basically you're solving a block. It's just a complex um, computation, and when you solve that complex computation, you get rewarded. And so it's pre-programmed, or there's an algorithm that basically says we like the idea that a block, we as in the blockchain, we like the idea that a block will be solved every 10 minutes. And so here's what happens. Let's say let's gonna just apply fake units to it. You have 1 million units of computational power. And with that computational power, you can solve a block every 10 minutes. Let's say that 1 million turns into 2 million. So basically, after 2 weeks of data, the blockchain is going to look back at itself and say, hey, wait a second, we've been solving blocks every 5 minutes. That's not good. That's too fast. So we're going to readjust it so it's back to 10 minutes by making the computations much more difficult. So when that happens, okay, now everything's good. Now we are solving blocks every 10 minutes. Now let's say of those 2 million units, it drops to 1 million again. Now the blockchain's gonna, after 2 weeks, go, wait a second, we've been solving every 20 minutes. That's too slow. Now we got to go back to 10 minutes. So we're gonna go back, we're gonna make it easier to solve so we can find that sweet spot of 10 minutes. And so thinking about that, I'm like, the end state, in my opinion, is still going to be the same. And so I asked, in the comment section, the guy that raised this point, I was like, how do you see this, right? How do you see this solving anything? And it's kind of like back to mining in gold, silver, and commodities. What he's saying is, hey, if difficulty gets too high and if the difficulty gets too high and energy gets too expensive, all that's going to happen is that the high cost miners, like in mining, it's high cost producers, are just going to go bankrupt or they're going to turn off. And so so let's say we're at 10 million units of mining power, and if all those high cost miners go offline because the rewards aren't good enough and energy costs are too high, you're just going to go down to like 100,000 miners. And it's going to be like, well, you can still sustain the network on 100,000 miners. And because you're only using 100,000 instead of 10 million, you're not using a lot of energy anymore. So there you go. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, you know what? You're right to a certain degree. You're going to mitigate the energy crisis and Bitcoin by basically kicking out or bankrupting those high cost miners or even medium cost miners and only go to the most efficient miners available. So Andy, that's basically what I've learned in the last 2 days since our last video by interacting with some other folks in the community. But I think we've already talked a little bit about it, and you're already on the same page, which is That's assuming the low cost miners can even stay around.
Yeah, no, I agree. What happens when you go below the cost of the low miners? So are they gonna continually adjust it so it goes down and down and down and down and actually decline the cost of mining?
Right. The difficulty will get easier and easier and easier and easier to ensure a block is mined essentially or solved every 10 minutes. And I think it's really hard to qualify or quantify this because it's just we're going to the extreme of a scenario that could generally happen. And since this hasn't happened before in any blockchain, and I don't know if they've ever done a stress test on this to figure it out, an internal stress test where an offline stress test basically. But I linked you a photo. If you can go
Yeah,
ahead and open that up and share it.
it's right here.
Yeah, that's the one. So the first correction I will make here is I had a hard time finding a good photo to represent this, and I didn't want to make it. So the caveat here is 2050. It says nil. It should say almost
Negligible.
negligible or not applicable. In reality, I think so you know how I told you the adjustment gets made every 10 minutes? So there will be some 2-week periods where you're solving faster than needed, and there'll be some 2 weeks period where you're solving slower than you should be. So there is no hard date as to when all the Bitcoin will be mined, but I was reading data, it's anything from 2080 to 2140. And I think most of the resources I read online was quoting 2140 as when we will completely run out of Bitcoin. So how about for the purposes of this, let's just use 2140 or 2100 as the time where we'll have zero. But what the chart is representing is still not inaccurate. You have your block fees, essentially, which is when a miner solves a block, they will be rewarded. And as of today, and it halves every 4 years, that reward halves. So as of today, we are at 6.25 Bitcoin. If you solve a block, you get 6.25 Bitcoin. And in 2024, or it might be late 2023, it's not exactly 4 years. I think it's like 3 years and 10 months or 3 years and 9 months. The reward gets halved, and that's where you get that asymptote that I was talking about with you earlier. So then that means in 2024, we will be at just over 3 Bitcoin per reward. So if you get 6.25 Bitcoin today after all that energy, and energy is going to get more expensive in the next 2 years, if the energy crisis thesis is holding true, but your reward gets cut in half. Like we could see big problems in 2 years. This might actually happen a little faster than I thought, at least for Bitcoin, right? At least for Bitcoin the way it is right now. If the rewards go from 6 to 3 in 2 years, then
Wouldn't that difficulty adjustment just adjust it way lower
so
and make
right.
it
So
make it far easier?
well, the block will still always be solved in 10 minutes. So you'll use less theoretically, you'll be able to use less computational power to solve the block, but every block will still give you 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. So instead of using the word block, I think it's more accurate, or it might make more sense to say this. You get 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. In 2 years, you're going to be getting 3.125. Is that right? Yeah, 3.125 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And then in 4 more years, it's going to go down to 1.5.
But if the energy crisis comes and the cost goes way up, they just make it far easier so that you'd get the amount per every 10 minutes.
You would so you're right. So the difficulty adjustment will go down, but it's going to be difficult enough that it will still take 10 minutes to solve.
Yes.
So over the course of 10 minutes, you're still going to be using roughly the same amount of energy.
Well, no, because your difficulty is your computing power and or your energy cost.
Right. So your computing power will be factored in for those 10 minutes.
So
right.
Yeah, so if all these miners come offline,
yeah,
and you have a difficulty adjustment, it would adjust it So the mining costs would go lower because your computational power will go way down to hit 10 minutes. Does that make sense?
It's kind of right, but you're only going to get rewarded every 10 minutes. So if you have so if your miner right now today can solve not solve if your miner today runs off of 100 units of energy every 10 minutes, it's going to stay that way whether or not the difficulty adjustment changes. You're still going to be running on max power to try to solve as fast as possible and beat everyone else to that validation.
Yeah, the problem that I think that would occur is you'd see volatility, because if you're looking at the last 2 weeks and you've got a volatile energy price, moving all around, it's going to look back and say, oh crap, we don't have any miners online. We're going to adjust the difficulty to 0. And then it looks back and it says, oh crap, we're at 0 and everybody jumped on the train. Now I got to move it to like infinity. So I think what happens was when you get on the tail end, it's going to go like super volatile as things go all wonky.
Yeah, it's going to be happening, and it will happen every 2 weeks.
Or could go. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Well, I really don't know either, and I can't find any data to support this either. I don't think people are thinking about this as a potential.
Yeah, so it's basically you need reliable power that's cheap.
Yeah.
That's really what it needs in order to survive.
Exactly.
And you need it somewhere in the world. It doesn't have to be everywhere. It just has to be somewhere.
Right, but then that also poses problems too, which is why this is so complex, because it's like, okay, let's say that happens and that solves everything. Well, let's say that can only happen in one spot. Let's just say it's some random spot in Kazakhstan where there's a lot of free natural gas just floating around for whatever reason. Well, now you just centralized everything. And I have data somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Is this? Oh, I do have it. Okay, cool.
You want to share?
I went ahead and pulled up the top 3 mining pools. So Andy, the way it works is that obviously if I run like a little server in my house, I'll never be able to validate a Bitcoin in 10 minutes because there's so many people competing for that block that it will never be me. It's just like, I think it's like you have a better shot at winning the lottery. So what happens is everyone pools together their resources and they create a pool to all solve it together. And then those rewards get, spread out to everyone based off of your participation rate. And so these pools have basically taken over Bitcoin. And here's the data that I got here. So 24% of the total Bitcoin network hash rate is owned by Foundry USA. And then 18% is owned by Antpool, and then 15% is owned by Binance, which is also an exchange. So when we take the sum of that, we're at 50%, or over 50%, right? 24 plus 18 plus 15, yeah, just over 50%. So if everyone gets priced out, like those 3 pools might be able to own a majority stake in the mining operations. And at that point, those 3 pools, the leads of those pools, they can do whatever they want. Theoretically, if you own over 50% of the mining operation, you can change the blockchain.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yep.
I would say, again, I'm so far removed from Bitcoin and some of the arguments that people have that are pro Bitcoin that, sometimes it's hard for me to really even stay on track, because when you take these complicated systems, I kind of just check out because it's so complicated and there's so much risk to the system. So, I mean, everybody thinks like, the best designs in this world are designs that are the simplest, because there's not much complexity to it. So you want to like decomplex the entire world. You're describing a system that is ultra complex. So then the question is, what's the chances of this thing being successful with the complexity that's like infinity in a world that if you have any sort of hiccups in energy or power delivery or whatever, we may not. I just think it's risky. I don't know.
We're only evaluating. I think most people are justifying its use case and evaluating its use case based off of the market conditions that we have today and the market conditions we've had since 2009. which is when it was released.
Rated. Mhm.
And when you do that, that's just you can't do that. Sometimes you got to project forward and look at different courses of action. Okay, course of action 1, we have an energy crisis. Course of action 2, we have a centralization of all the miners. Course of action 3, we have some computer chip shortage, right? So those are 3 different courses of action I just thought of that could really destroy the blockchain network, and no one wants to talk about it. It seems like no one wants to really experiment with that thought process, that thought idea, at least that idea experiment.
Well, what I could say is this. Then let's just assume they're all right. All right. So let's assume that Bitcoin will be around. It's going to be. There's nothing wrong with its inherent design, the system. Yeah, it could be slow, whatever, but it still has transaction fees, right? Just like everything else. That's a major problem, right? Because the fees is really what people are trying to get away from. There's a couple of things that people are trying to get away from, I think. Fees and the devaluation of the underlying currency. So you can solve some of this. You can solve maybe the devaluation of a currency, and let's say Bitcoin solve that by keeping it limited. But then the question is, why would anyone use Bitcoin? What is the draw to Bitcoin? And I hear Michael Saylor. I've listened to his things. I've heard him talk about stored energy, and basically he uses the same type of argument that you would for gold, for silver, for whatever it is. But I mean, gold and silver are innate. That's something to the world that we find in nature. We don't find Bitcoin in nature. And everything that's been man-made, at least all the way up till today, in terms of currencies, have all gone to zero. And I look at it, and I listen to his arguments. Some of them I think are valid arguments. Other ones I'm not as sure on. So he'll talk about Visa and MasterCard and the frictional fees that they charge for those transactions. And It's like, well, you've got frictional fees in Bitcoin too. So I don't know how that would be a valid argument for a case against Visa and MasterCard and a case for Bitcoin. And so you can have stored energy in Bitcoin. That's fine. It took a whole bunch of energy to create this thing, but that doesn't mean that thing is valuable. It doesn't mean that people will adopt Bitcoin. It doesn't mean anything. So I don't know if that argument is a valid argument. He'll say that Bitcoin's digital gold. Maybe not. I would side on no, it's not digital gold. And why are you even comparing Bitcoin to gold? Bitcoin is just it was run through a bunch of computational, algorithms that use copious amounts of energy, and then you have some output. Now, the question is, why would anyone use the output? It's got to do something that is completely better than everyone else. And I don't think that, even if you were to say that the design of Bitcoin is great, there's all these inherent weaknesses with it being digital. There's the exchanges. What if they shut down all the exchanges in the world, which they basically did? So you can transact in Bitcoin maybe, but as soon as you get onto an exchange, you're kind of screwed, because now they're going to say, gotcha, you can't convert back out of to whatever currency or to whatever thing you want to transact out of. What's your opinions on maybe some of that stuff?
So in terms of why you were discussing that, I thought of this similar scenario, right? Which is with gold mining, silver mining, and all those things, where the people that make the rules of how that happens is nature. That's it, and we can't change it. It's not like we can just one day say, oh, we're going to double the gold supply or double the silver supply in the earth. It's pretty much fixed. Mm-hmm. And so while you're talking about that, I thought to myself, okay, what is one big controversial moment in Bitcoin history that I can recall? And that was back in 2017 when the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash split. Just some rough history. I'm going off the cuff. I know someone can correct me, but this was like 5 years ago. So the Lightning Network needed it needed the code to change just a little bit in order for that upgrade to happen. And that was around 2017. And so all the majority stake of the miners, again, over 50%, said, okay, we will change the code, we will change the code or download the new algorithm and run that version, which can support a future upgrade to the Lightning Network. And then some other miners said, no, I disagree. I want to keep this pure and keep this the way it's always been and prioritize security over transaction fees. So we're going to continue mining this way. When that happened, the upgrade worked. Or not worked. It was the majority vote. So most people went with the upgrade. And thinking about that, I go, that is, how do you put it? To many people, that is proof of Bitcoin overcoming a problem by evolving. But if you can overcome a problem by evolving, you can also evolve to destroy the whole system. That means all it takes is over 50% of the people need to agree to do something selfish, and they can basically shut it all down. That can't happen in commodity or gold and silver, right? And precious metals. I mean, how would you even begin to do that? I mean, I guess you can always do it through like taxation and theft and all that, but you can hide it to a certain degree. You can still, through the black market, go to your local butcher and say, here's a silver coin. Can I get some steak? But if they shut down the whole network, then yeah, there's literally nothing you can do. Your wallet and the Bitcoin you have on your desktop, on your private key, would literally be worthless because the way they can change the algorithm if a majority stake does happen. Do you see it that way too?
Well, the way that I see Bitcoin is it's so complicated in its function and its uses and whatnot. I don't see why anybody would adopt it in mass. Like for instance, if this thing was truly let's say I want to buy Bitcoin, right? How does one buy Bitcoin? And I want to be anonymous. I do not want my name tied to anything. How do I go about buying Bitcoin?
Well, you'd probably give cash to a friend who would buy it for you and then send it to you from wallet to wallet.
So
That's
then
the only.
I would have to have a person sign up and do this. But how would I transact out of it or in it? I mean, I could transact Bitcoin around, but never
Yeah.
go out of the system.
Right. So the only way you can use it is if you have vendors that you want to use, you can give them Bitcoin and then they can sell you something. Or they can trade you whatever you're buying from them, right?
So can I trade in Colorado to California, make a trade, it's on the ledger, and be anonymous and get
You're probably
something
yeah.
in return, and then do I have to pay tax on it?
If as long as it's wallet to wallet, private key to private key, wallet to wallet, then yeah, you can do that. But you can do that with
And
cash too. So I don't.
well, you'd have to pay tax, right?
Well, it depends. It depends who you're buying from. If they disclose it that that's happening, like let's say you want to sell me a motorcycle for 5 grand. Well, no, that won't work because you have permits and insurance, so you do have to disclose that. Let's say you want to sell me your computer. You have some awesome
Mm-hmm.
computer for 5 grand. You want to sell me. If I give you cash and you give me the computer, no one knows any different. No one has to claim anything. If I give you Bitcoin from private wallet from my private wallet to your private wallet, then no one needs to know anything, right?
Yeah.
There you go. I
So
think that's the solution. But it's the same. You can do it with cash. You can do that with you can trade anything. The
no,
problem is that
I'm just trying to think how. I mean, so when I transact wallet to wallet, I can do that all the way from Colorado to California.
yes,
And then what is that thing that makes that transaction? Is it Bitcoin itself, the network?
yeah, the network would have to validate it. The miners would validate that transaction. When you solve a block, that part of that block is either a new Bitcoin you're mining or that block is part of the transaction happening. They're validating your transaction.
So there's evidence that a transaction existed and it's on the ledger,
Yes.
and nobody knows what this wallet is.
Theoretically, what they'll see is this long of a wallet address transferred to this long of a wallet address. That's basically what they would see. Now, if you
Okay.
can tie your name to that wallet address, then yeah, you would have problems.
So how do I get a wallet address without opening anything on an exchange?
Alternate. Oh, yeah. Well, you can do that. You can go download it. You can go download it to your
I'm not
desktop.
trying to
Yeah.
set this up, guys. I'm not trying to like
Yeah,
do
we're all
anything.
learning,
I'm just asking questions.
which is good because that's where you're either going to find holes in the total argument or holes in your own argument. But yeah, you would download the wallet to your desktop. You would open it up. You would create your own private address. It usually comes with a QR code or another very long code that you can print out and store it in your safe so that you can recover that key in the future. And then you can send, if someone else buys Bitcoin for you on Coinbase, they can then send it to you.
You know what's going to happen, right? This is what I think is going to happen. If it is that good, if the system is that good, the government's going to create a system that is exactly the same and then outlaw the use of
Yeah, of
any
course.
of these, because it's going to be a directly competing currency, and you cannot counterfeit currency. So if they're going to say, I don't know how they're going to do it in terms of, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. So if they give the technology to the government, they're going to do bad things, and it's all going to be able to be tracked and everything.
Yeah.
This is actually a horrible technology to have if it were to go through and the government uses it. Because then they can control every aspect. They can see everything. They can do all sorts of stuff, whatever they want.
And you know what else they're going to do? They're going to make sure that the whatever coin they create, it will have a infinite supply, so you can just print more.
Yep. And then they're going to force everybody to pay taxes in it or do whatever in it.
I mean, think about it, right? Like if we just look back at the last 2 or 3 years of what you've been calling the medical event of 2020,
Mhm.
like it's clear that most people, if they want to continue living, right, in a comfortable environment, they'll just obey whatever people say, right? Like as long
Right.
as it's not too destructive to you. Okay. Yeah, go wear a mask. All right, I'll wear my freaking mask if I can shop and get groceries, whatever. So, I mean, if you own a small business and someone tells you, yeah, you can't accept Bitcoin anymore, you need to accept US dollar coin. Your average person's gonna be like, if they go, what if I don't? And be like, well, if we find out, we're going to throw you in jail. Okay, no more Bitcoin. So people to feed their families, they're gonna be like, yeah, I'm not accepting your Bitcoin. I'm taking
Right.
USD coin from now on. Sorry. Hey, Treasury coin, Yellen
Yep.
coin, Al coin, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, what could happen is gold and silver moon. They go all the way to the moon and back, because the ability to transact outside of a system becomes infinitely valuable.
Yeah.
And you can actually transact out of the system.
But
So
okay. My name's Randy. I know you got another video event coming up, so and I see people already joining to get ready for it. But I wonder if
no,
we've
that's supposed to be at 5 p.m. It's only
yeah. Oh,
2:45.
it's too early. But okay. I think we hit all the high notes though.
All right, sounds good. So thanks for coming on, Andrew. If you guys want to reach out to Andrew, definitely check out his Twitter. It's at silver_Amir. I know he doesn't go on very often,
Yeah.
but
But if you comment on this video, I'm happy to reply back
or
and
comment
have
below.
I'll converse.
All right, guys. So that's all I've got. Thanks for coming on, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And we'll catch everyone next time. See ya.